Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second Project Green Forum of 2014. Our speaker today is Rita Minard, and she'll be talking to us about this wonderful plant, clematis. I just learned how to pronounce her name and how to pronounce the name of that plant, and both of those are correct. But before we get started, I have a few announcements to make. You may have noticed that there is a handout on the table out there. There was a handout of all the varieties of clematis that Rita will be talking about. We ran out of handouts because we have such a good crowd, but it's on the Project Green website, projectgreen.org, and you can find it there. You can also find a list of the books about clematis that Rita recommends and her reviews of the book that will be on the website as well. So you can look that all up, and you don't have to scribble like crazy if you don't have a handout. There is a little flyer for the Greater Des Moines Botanical Garden Spring Festival, which is May 8th through 11th, that Rita wanted you all to know about. It sounds like a lot of fun. A lot of classes, talks, cool plants to buy if you're really into interesting plants. So the flyer is there on the back table for this as well. The Project Green newsletter is there if you don't get that, and of course Betty Can is signing everybody up to make sure you get those in the mail. And again, those are on the Project Green website if you need to see it. I think I've covered all those. A quick list of what's coming up. A month from today, March 9th, we will have our last garden forum, and it will be Susan Applegate-Hurst who's talking on garden design. She talked here 2 or 3 years ago on raising and using culinary herbs, if you recall. She's a fun speaker, and she wants me to stress that she's going to be talking about garden design without blueprints. And on May 10 is the Project Green Garden Fair. That's where we sell all the plants at Carver Hawkeye Arena, and it's the primary fundraiser for Project Green. And then on July 12th, is the garden tours, the Project Green garden tours. And this is going to be a little different format. We're going to start at 3 in the afternoon and go to 8 at night. And I expect everybody to bring their bottle of wine with them. All right. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Rita Minard. Rita grew up in central Minnesota. Her folks were avid vegetable gardeners and had pretty much fed their whole family of 7 kids with these vegetable gardens. But her dad was the ornamental gardener. He was much into roses and climbing things, and that kind of got in her blood as well and got her started loving clematis. She's lived in Des Moines for 34 years. She's married with kids and grandkids. She's a Polk County Master Gardener, and she's a volunteer for the Greater Des Moines Botanical Garden, which is the outfit that's putting on this festival. Yes. Her passions are in order: gardening, travel, and reading. And we want to welcome Rita today. You do the usual format. Try to limit your questions during her presentation, which will last about an hour. But if you have questions, write them down on the little pieces of paper that are on each chair. Then bring them up here during the break when we will be eating cookies and coffee back there. And then in the last part of the presentation, Rita will answer the questions. And don't forget, we have door prizes. I hope you've all signed up for them. And they're over here. We have 2 Project Green hats, 2 nice gift cards from Tyson's and Iowa City Landscape, and a good pair of clippers. Yeah, so we'll be handing those out. We'll be handing those out during the second half of the program, during the questions and answers. And would you all please dim your cell phones? I'm doing mine right now. Thank you so much, and welcome, Rita.
Thank you, Mary. I'm so glad to see you all here today. Thank you for coming out. And I want to hear more about that garden tour. Did you say July 12th? I think I might be back for that. I planted Clematis jackmanii more than 25 years ago after admiring one in my neighbor's garden. Back then, as I recall, the only other clematis that was offered locally was Nellie Moser. Nellie Moser was rather short-lived in my garden. I now know that the stripes and some of the paler flowered clematis appreciate some afternoon shade. So that's one of the tips that I want to leave with you today. Over the years, I've planted at least 100 different varieties of clematis in my garden. I think you might say that I'm hooked. Today, I would like to show you some of the reasons why I find this group of plants so fascinating. The first reason I like clematis is the diversity. There are tall ones, some reaching 20 to 30 feet tall, like Sweet Autumn Clematis and Duchess of Albany. Others in this group, in this height group, include some of the Tanjuticas and the Montanas. There are short ones, reaching only to about 1 foot, like Filigree and Bijou. Don't you love those names?
Excuse me, could you have the mic turned up? It's hard to hear.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? No? Okay, they're going to fix that. There's many, oh, there we go. All right. Tell me if I get too loud because sometimes I get carried away. I get so excited. Anyway, there's many, many more in between those groups that I told you about, the really tall ones and the really short ones. Talk about a tried and true plant. Jack Manii has been around since the mid-1800s. And even though he's been in my garden for only about 27 years, I am amazed and delighted every year with the masses of purple blooms that show up year after year. There's an amazing number of bloom colors. There are doubles, like Vivian Pennell, even stripes. Another reason I like clematis so much is that they make fantastic focal points and privacy screens at the same time. I'm going to back up just a little bit just to tell you that you can hide an unwanted site, like a compost heap or something with clematis. Some bloom high on the vine, others close to the ground and covering the plant. Another thing that I like about clematis is the amazing number of ways there are to display them. I especially like a decorative trellis that I very often will design a trellis in my head, and then I'll ask my husband Keith to create them for me, like the peacock trellis that you can see here. This is a double peacock trellis that he made for me. We also have half versions, and they are at the front of the garden on 3 sides of this garden. They can be grown horizontally. Sweet Autumn Clematis growing horizontally. They can be grown vertically. We all know that, right? In containers and even hanging baskets. Some clematis may look delicate, but most of my experience is that they are not. Most of them are not. With a half dozen different varieties of clematis, you could have one in bloom from April through October. Did we lose the sound again? And sometimes beyond. Okay. I've had some bloom in my garden even in November, in early November. And third, a side benefit to growing these beauties is the numerous opportunities to record them on film. I I'd like to show some more of them to you now. Can you hear me? No. Okay, shall I wait? Yes. Okay, I'm just going to keep testing. I wonder, can you hear me? No?
How's it sound? No.
Can you hear me now? Nope.
There's not much sound at all. We're working on it, sorry.
That's okay. Are we all okay? Yeah. We're warm and cozy in here, aren't we? I'm a little warm. Hello? Oh. Hello? Keep checking.
Let's switch your mic.
Okay. Hello? Nope, still not going. Do you want me to undo
That
this?
one's off. Yeah, just go ahead and take that off.
Technical difficulties. Now you can hear me, right? Yeah. Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? Can you hear me
See,
now?
this is off, so this isn't working at all.
Oh, it's this.
You're on
Oh,
this.
I don't have to get closer to that. So what do you think happened?
I have no
Am I-
idea, but we're going to switch you out
Not
just
up-
to be sure.
Not operator error. We've all heard of technical difficulties, right?
Okay. I'm going to put this up higher. You have a very quiet voice.
Oh, actually, I'm trying to keep it quiet because
Oh.
it's normally booming.
Well, talk loud. I can turn this down. Here, put this on your pocket, or in your pocket, either one.
Okay, thank you. Today I'm going to focus mainly on two of the pruning groups, pruning group 2 and pruning group 3. But I am also going to give a nod to pruning group 1. I started planting them a few years ago, so now I have some experience with them and I can pass that information along to you as well. If you are new to clematis, I strongly recommend that you start with the pruning group 3. There are a lot of them to choose from, a really wide variety to choose from, colors, height, shapes, different shapes, and they're really easy to remember how to prune them. These bloom on new growth, and so you want to prune them hard. And I prune these usually pretty early in the season, because if you don't, they start growing, and then it's like, oh, do I want to cut that off? But so if you do, and just be ruthless with it, cut them down. I would look. I mean, some say cut them to the ground. Some say 6 inches. I recommend 12 to 18. Do what feels good to you. And what I would look for are 2 emerging leaf buds, and 2 healthy ones, and just snip it above that. That's all you need to do, and then train it on whatever clematis or support that you want to give it. So like I said, late winter to early spring, I start pruning these. So here are some examples of pruning group 3, clematis. Jack Manny again is shown here with faded allium. And so this will tell you that it is blooming right after the allium. So those are usually in early May or mid-May or late May or whatever. 2 years ago, when we had that early spring, this bloomed for me on May 16th. Last year, June 17th. And so they're very often dependent. I think we've got another thing going on here. So, what did I do?
You
What did I
didn't.
do?
You didn't.
Oh, I didn't do anything.
No.
I didn't do it, Mom.
There you go.
Okay, that's all right. I'm okay. Anyway, so you're seeing, so it's dependent on the weather, and they all are. I mean, they're all dependent on the weather. Real variable time as far as them coming into bloom. Here you see the same plant blooming along with sweet autumn clematis. And so that, for me in my garden, blooms about mid-August. So it blooms for quite some time. Tie-dye. Can you see the family resemblance? Tie-dye is in the Jackmanii family. And I grew up in an era where this just sort of feels like a comfortable, blast back to the 60s for me. With a potential growth of 12 to 20 feet and the wonderful cutout sepals and regal coloring, I call this the aristocrat of climbers, the aristocrat of clematis. It's called Gypsy Queen. And it really is a wonderful plant. I hope it made it to my recommendation list. I really like this one. Another wonderful tried and true clematis is Hagley Hybrid. This was raised in the mid-1940s and introduced in the mid-1950s. It's described as dusky shell pink, and in the United States it's sometimes sold under the trade name pink chiffon. This one really is a good plant, and I really recommend it as well. Cardinal Wyszynski is another great plant. It has wonderful large red flowers. I now know, when I planted this, I didn't know that the reds really like more sun to really keep that vibrant red. So if I were planting this, not today, but this year, I would plant it in more sun than it gets. But I still love it for a lot of reasons. Sometimes this one is listed as a pruning group too. So like almost everything, there are exceptions to the rule. So you can hard prune it or lightly prune it. Madame Barreau-Vaillard. Look at the beautiful color on this one. Velvety, bluish lilac pink. She prefers a warm, sunny place. I have her here on an umbrella form. Look at the masses. You could take advantage of her potential 10 to 12 foot height by growing her on an arbor or a pergola, maybe along with another tall climbing plant, another clematis maybe, or a climbing rose. She blooms later in the summer. So those that fall into the pruning class 2 are the early flowering, large flowered hybrids. There's probably more confusion with these, so I'm going to tell you a couple of different ways that you can prune them. The way I learned was to start at the top of the plant, and they bloom first on last year's growth. So you don't want to prune them down hard, or you're going to be missing that first group of the actual large. I think the best show is on that group. So the way I learned was to start at the top of the plant and just prune down to the first strong leaf buds. That's where the flowers are nestling. So just cut right above that, and then prune out anything that is obviously dead. Now, you want to wait because all clematis look like they're dead in the wintertime, so you want to make sure that it's got some new growth, and you can tell when that's coming out. Alternatively, you can wait until that first flush of flowers is done, and then prune it down hard. Not way down, but you could prune it maybe a third or more from that. And then it'll quickly rejuvenate itself and put out a lot more bloom. And then very often, many of them will bloom later on that new growth. So I like to prune these again in late winter. often March. I'll go out on a nice day in March and get reacquainted with my clematis. This year it might be April before I get out there. So that's that's 2 ways that you can prune them. Fertilize after you prune your plant. Avoid fertilizing them while they're in bloom, however, because that can potentially shorten the bloom time. So I use a fertilizer that I would also use for roses. They take a lot of the same requirements. Some people use a liquid tomato fertilizer, so anything that you would use for tomatoes is good. Some use a liquid seaweed. A well-balanced fertilizer is good, but anytime you prune them is an excellent time to fertilize them. And they're heavy feeders, not that you want to pile it on. I would do it a couple of times, maybe early and then a little later after you've maybe deadheaded or whatever, than to put it all on at once. So I'm going to show you some examples of pruning group 2 now. This is Elsa Spaeth. Now, the other thing that I wanted to tell you is that very often on these cards it'll give you a height range. Take that with a grain of salt, as well as the bloom time, because as you know now the bloom time will be dependent on how the weather has been going. Height too. So I read a lot about clematis. In this, which I love this book. I don't know if you could maybe get it on half.com or something like that. It might be available. But this is put out by the lady that started the American Clematis Society, Edith Malik. I love this book. But she's from Southern California, and they have different plants respond differently there. And so for this one, she says 6 to 8 feet. Now, Donahue's, the clematis growers from Minnesota, say 10 to 12 feet. So that's a big discrepancy. So if you get this one and you think it's only going to be a little one, you're going to put it on a little trellis, and then it just flops over, and you just have a kind of a big. So, but anyways, take those with a grain of salt. This one is blooming rather low to the ground, but I've got to tell you, these flowers are huge. And they really are quite spectacular. I have a friend that was visiting my garden when this was in bloom, and she said, Rita, I don't normally like purple flowers, but I'm going to make an exception for this one. So look at this eye-catching beauty from Japan. It's best planted with some shade, afternoon shade, to prevent the flowers from fading. I had this one in a little bit more sun than it probably would have wanted. It's moved on now to clematis heaven. But boy, did I take her picture while she was around. Francisca Maria. This is a compact growing double clematis. Now Donahue's says 5 to 7 feet, and in the clematis world, that's considered compact. And you also have to realize too that clematis don't bolt straight up. They'll meander up the trellis or whatever you have it growing on. So 5 to 7 feet, that's pretty compact. It's blue-purple flowers with yellow anthers. I think it's really stunning. So stunning that I planted it in another spot. Silver Moon. When I first heard about this clematis, my only question was, where can I buy it? It blooms in full shade, and it does really well in full shade. It lights up a shady area with its silver mauve, sometimes described as mother of pearl flowers. Where you see this bouquet presenting itself at the top of this fence, that gets pretty much sun, so it's pretty versatile. But look at the bouquet that presented with me. And then I just let it flop over to the other side of the fence. It's actually planted on this side of the fence in complete shade. Yes, I love it. Gillian Blades is a beautiful and refined clematis. It grows well in a compact, shady area. The sepals are pure white with a tinge of mauve when they first open. They're ruffled on the edges and pointed at the tips. Rebecca is a brilliant red. And again, I want to remind you that the best color is in full sun. And talk about being hooked and being really grateful to have a husband that supports my habit. I was shopping at Donahue's a few years ago, and I thought, oh, I don't really need, very many clematis this year. I don't know what I was thinking, but I had a couple of them, and my husband brings this one over. Well, how about this one? No, I don't need it. Okay, twist my arm, I'll buy it. I'm so happy I did. Rebecca is really beautiful. It's pruning group 2, so prune her lightly. Mrs. Chumley. She's the one with the blue flowers on the left side of the screen. She grows 12 to 16 feet. I want to tell you, one of the things that I really like about this book is it's helped me with the pronunciation of several clematis, including this one, because I didn't know that that was called Mrs. Chumley. Look at all the flowers. It has a potential of 12 to 16 feet. Haku Kan. Here's another Japanese cultivar. The long sepals in curve, giving a double effect. It's very different and interesting. Blue Ravine. I'm sure this made it to my recommendation list. I like this one for so many reasons, too. The flowers are huge. The color of the flowers are beautiful. The foliage stays pretty nice. This one is, I think this is a spray that grew later on. It's actually grew up with trellis and then found its way over this miniature lilac tree that I have planted there. Oh, I planted it in another spot too. Double the fun. Okay, so here you can see a little more clearly that right below those blooms is Autumn Joy, or one of the sedums. So we know that that blooms, the color comes into effect late in the summer or early fall. And then way over to the far left of the screen, there's Sweet Autumn Clematis coming into bloom too. So we know that this flower bloomed early on, like in May, and then grew some more and bloomed again later. What's not to love about that? Killian Donahue, I've got to read my notes here. Ruby red in the center, fades to brilliant fuchsia, and then orchid color at the edge. This one's a little shop worn. It's been around for a long time, but I wanted to show you the fun little moppy seed head that develops after the sepals fall. Pailu means little duckling in Estonian. This one is a very compact, prolific bloomer. I would situate this one in front of the garden so that you can take advantage of they're smaller flowers, maybe 2 to 3 inches across. Now, when I first saw this one featured in this book, it said to prune it hard, which means pruning group 3 blooms on new growth. And then, so that's what I thought it was. And then I was looking at Clematis on the web, and they said prune it lightly for the double flowers that you get earlier in the season. So then I went back to this book, and sure enough, on the other page, she says, In USDA zones 4 through 9, the early flowers are double and late season flowers are single, but only single flowers are produced in zones 10 and 11, which is where she lives. So really kind of pay attention to when they bloom in your garden. And actually don't worry about the pruning so much. They'll tell you when they want to be pruned. But I love this one in so many ways. And I want to tell you too that sometimes, I bought this one first. I thought I was buying her because I wanted her so bad at one of the big box stores. And I got her home and it bloomed, but it wasn't this one. And I was a little disappointed, but it was, what was it? Crystal Fountain, which is a beautiful flower also. So it's okay. I eventually got another one, and now I have two. They're both in front of the garden. Love it. Royalty is a very compact, double to semi-double purple-flowered clematis. This one that you see in this picture, I planted several years ago, and then it disappeared, and it never did come back. But I like it so much that last year I bought another one and placed it close to where this original one was. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing it this year. We're going to move on to a group of pruning group 3 now. These are all hard pruned because they bloom only on new growth. It's called the Viticellas. This is a remarkably hardy group of clematis. They are, the species Viticella is originally from Southern Europe. This one is called Blue Angel. And I think the flash was on, so it sort of washed out this color. But look at the color on this. And it has sort of a shimmery effect on the sepals. And even in full sun, full sun or shade, it just lights up the area. And I also like the square shape of this one. Betty Corning is a native to the United States. Betty Corning is a Viticella with nodding mauve-colored flowers. I like to grow this one vertically so that you can look up into the bell and see the color of the flower. It's a little bit more intense inside than it is on the outside. Notice the long stems on this. It might be a little exaggerated on this picture, but maybe not much. It makes a wonderful cut flower. And many clematis make wonderful cut flowers. Some have very short stems, and you can just float them in a shallow bowl. This one you could actually put up in a vase with the long stems. Madame Julia Coravon is another Viticella. It is described as claret red. As it ages, the sepals twist a little bit. So that makes it kind of a fun. This one tends to maybe be a little leggy at the bottom. So you might, the flowers grow a little, more on top. So at least they do for me. So you might want to put it behind a shrub or plant some annuals in front of it or something like that. It doesn't bother me, but it does some people. So that's one thing to be aware with this one. Alba luxurians, I like to grow this one horizontally, and I have it in front of the garden as on a short modular fence, and I just weave it in and out. And it actually gives so much interest in the front of the border, and you don't notice sometimes when the flowers are there's not so much going on in the rest of the garden. It just sort of blocks that all out. This would also make a nice companion plant to another pruning group 3 clematis with contrasting colors and shapes. Venosa violacea. Really love this one. It's one of the larger flowered Viticellas. I love the shading on this one, the purple on the outside, violet purple on the outside, and the anthers in the center are purple as well. You can really see it showing up here. This is the Texensis group of clematis. Pruning group 3. although sometimes they will die to the ground in our winter weathers. And so watch for them to emerge from the ground, from the crown of the plant. I want to tell you a little bit about the species Texensis. All of the red-flowered clematis that are in cultivation has Texensis as in their ancestry. And Texensis is a species native to the United States in the high plateau area of Texas. The reds, again, and this group, even though some of them are pink, they need a lot of sun. They like to have plenty of water followed by sharp drainage. They actually establish more quickly, and I wrote this down because I think I just read this on Friday. They establish more quickly when given plenty of gravel or coarse sand in the planting holes and as a mulch. I didn't know that before Friday. So I wanted to share that with you. When I first saw this one, Princess Diana, I did a double take. That's a clematis? I hadn't seen anything like it. And looking back, I think this is when I truly became hooked on clematis. The flowers are all, they're not all, some of them are nodding bells, but a lot of them are described as urn-shaped. This one sort of has an upright tulip shape to it. Really beautiful. Grave-tie beauty is a deep red, and the sepals sort of tend to splay out and sort of gives a star-like effect to it. Here you see it with some flowers on the left, and then you can see the seed heads, and they're fun. I think they're fun. I tend to leave them when I like them as much because I think they give a long-lasting decorative effect to the plant. Now you could deadhead, and that sometimes just pruning it, even deadheading will actually encourage more flowering. So, it's really up to you and what you want to do. Pagoda has more of a nodding bell shape to it. I love this one, and I really like standing in front of this. Lots and lots of blooms. I like standing in front of it and watching the flowers just dance in the breeze. Étoile rose is on the right side of the slide, nodding urn-shaped flowers. I planted it here with Mrs. Chumley. Mrs. Chumley being a pruning group 2 and Étoile rose being a pruning group 3. I'm using this as an example of what I would not recommend doing because they'll have a tendency to overlap, and then you're going to go, oh, which one's which? I don't have a problem with it, but it's actually better if you're going to plant 2 or more together to plant the same pruning group. But Étoile rose bloomed in my garden for 18 weeks last year. So there's a lot to be said about that. Duchess of Albany is another Texensis. This one bloomed for 13 weeks in my garden in 12 weeks in 2013. And it's a lighter pink. The shape of the flowers, I don't know why, it reminds me of a bird, like a dove, about ready to take off in flight. One of the things that I like about this is the foliage stays really nice for the most part. And so I think that speaks highly of it, but lots and lots of flowers as well. A couple of years ago, we changed the support that this one was growing on, and it was later on in the season, and so I cut it down to remove all of the foliage off from it. Within, I bet 4 weeks, it was back up to 4 feet or so and blooming again. So don't be afraid to cut them down. If you're not happy with it at any particular time, cut it down and let it rejuvenate itself. Fertilize it when you do. Sir Trevor Lawrence is the last Texensis that I want to show you. Look at the velvety color on this one. I really like it. And this one has 6 sepals. And I hope by now that you are understanding that I'm calling them sepals and not petals. That's what they're referred to. Sometimes another term is tepals, and you'll see that in different books. Some refer them as sepals, some as tepals. The last I read is the really correct term is sepals. I don't care what you call them. But this one I have growing with porcelainberry vine. Okay, now we're going to talk about the herbaceous clematis, and I'm introducing more and more. In fact, we're going to have a really nice offering of herbaceous clematis at the Greater Des Moines Botanical Garden Spring Plant Sale. And I'm really excited because there are a few that I haven't, that I don't have any experience with. So I'm really looking forward to introducing them to my garden. There's even one that I had never heard of that we're bringing in. So I'm really excited about that. The herbaceous clematis, and I will say on my fact sheet, I will tell you to plant clematis deep. Like I said, every rule has exceptions. The herbaceous clematis, you do not have to plant them deep. You can plant them like any other perennial, just at, where they come from, where they, are at the, in the pot. You can divide them in the fall. I don't recommend that you do that with the others, although you could. This one lends itself to doing that better. So they do not have to be planted deep. I want to stress that to you. They're non-clinging, so they can be tied up, although that looks a little restraining sometimes. They could be used as a ground cover. They could be draped over a shrub, or they could be propped up like I have here. I have it planted behind this tulip trellis, and the sun is coming from the side that it's not planted on, so they just naturally just drape through that trellis, and I don't have to do anything else with them, and they bloom all summer long. I think this one is really a nice cheery plant, and it made it to my recommendation list because I really like it so much. So the flowers start out as a darker blue purple, and then they fade to a lighter, almost blue. And like I said, they bloom all summer long. Love them. Durandii is another non-clinging. It has a potential of growing 4 to 6 feet. So if you want it to be propped up, I have it over by one of the tulip trellises, and it just lends itself to meandering them through that support. Here you see them on the ground, just hovering above some heuchera. And they have, the stamens in the center are kind of a button, yellow. They're long-lasting flowers on the vine, and they make long-lasting cut flowers as well. I really recommend them. You can find this, I think, pretty readily locally. We will have them at the Botanical Garden for sale this year. Okay, now we're done with the pruning group 3. This group that I'm going to show you now is a combination of pruning group 2 and pruning group 3. Most of them I noticed are pruning group 2. This one, I'm not sure what its name is. According to the descriptions, to me it looks like W.E. Gladstone. Don't ask me where that name came from. Probably somebody, is named after somebody, like so many clematis are. But this one I have planted. I originally planted on this short white trellis. It's only about 3 feet tall. I have since introduced another clematis, and I have another trellis, and I have the clematis actually growing right between the two of them. So it just kind of keeps it in bounds. And then, this is in my fairy garden. The centerpiece of the fairy garden is a miniature lilac tree. And this clematis works its way up and just drapes itself in and through the tree without any help from me. And after the lilacs are done blooming, this one starts to bloom, and it's absolutely delightful. Lots of flowers on it. I really love it. H.F. Young is sort of a Wedgwood blue, and it's a compact growing clematis. This one, this slide is in here to show you that sometimes if you've experienced trying to, maybe there's a wayward stem that's gotten off the trellis and you want to connect it into the trellis, if you try to do too sharp of a turn, it'll break right off in your hand, right? So actually what I would recommend is don't do that because I've done it so many times. Take it up a little higher and then start doing that. Or, like I did here, I just let it flop on the ground and look at how it's growing. It looks like it's blooming out of this ground cover sedum. Love that look. Here, I don't know what I did with this, but it gives a totally different look. And that's one of the things that I love about clematis too, is that they can look different on the same plant, even at the same time. Vivian Pennell, all of the doubles are in pruning group 2. And they are really quite eye-catching. Lemon Chiffon is a pruning group 2 clematis. It is a very, I don't know what color I would use. Lemon Chiffon, very mild yellow. I would plant this with some shade to keep the flowers from, to preserve the delicate flowering on these. Andromeda, I brought this one into the Botanical Center for when it was the Des Moines Botanical Center for sale. I had never heard of it, and I am really enamored with this one. Here it's shown in single form, but if you lightly prune it, the first flowers are double. This one is in it's cut, it's in a vase, and I just propped it up against a black background to really show it off. Ruby Glow is a beautiful clematis. This one I want to tell you is if you want it to grow up vertically, or any clematis, if you want to give it a little bit of help with some horizontal supports, this one doesn't have a lot of lower horizontal supports, and so it's sort of congregated on the ground. And if it's close to the front of the garden, which this one is, it's a nice effect. I like it. But I just want to tell you about that I would provide it with more horizontal supports. Kingfisher, look at the color on this one. Pruning group 2. This one grows to about 6 to 8 feet. I love the contrasting stamens on this one. Beautiful. Sweet Autumn. I think we're all maybe familiar with this one. It's pruning group 3. You want to hard prune it because it grows. I've got to tell you, there are so many reasons why I like this clematis. For me, the foliage stays nice on it. And, let's face it, we do grow clematis for the flowers. But this one doesn't bloom until later on. And so you really want, if it's going to do that and going to provide you with a wall of foliage, you want it to look nice. And this one, for me, always looks good. It is shown here in full sun, and it blooms exuberantly in full sun. I have one that's in full shade, and it planted itself there by the gazebo where I would never have planted it. And I have a rule of thumb. If a flower shows up, love it for 15 minutes and then decide what you want to do with it. So I let it grow. It sort of softens that metal gazebo panel, and it works its way up to the, I don't know what you would call it on the gazebo. It's a horizontal panel that goes around the gazebo, and it blooms up there. Now I help weaving it in and out, but it blooms in full shade. Not as exuberantly as it does in the sun. But the flowers are a vanilla scent. Hawthorn, some people say hawthorn scent. It makes an excellent focal point. Privacy screen. Here it gives privacy to our next door neighbor as well as us. People get out of their cars in the driveway, and it's like, where's that scent coming from? This is it. This is it. There's something I want to tell you about. So anyway, I mentioned the delightfully scented clusters of flower that seem to float on the plant. This one also self-sowed in the front of this garden. Wouldn't have planted it there in a million years. And I started to love it for a while and use it. And so I just weave it in and out of a low-growing fence and let it grow horizontally. It gets a little on the wide and wild side, so last year I removed it because I wanted to reconfigure that garden. But I enjoyed it for, I bet a good 3 years before I decided to, move on. So when it's in bloom, it's alive with honeybees and other beneficial insects, and we all want that, right? Birds enjoy the cover in the wintertime. Cardinals nested in one of my sweet autumn clematis one year in a very a spot where we're going in and out of the sunroom a lot in the summertime. And there they nested, and the babies came out and learned how to fly one day, and they didn't care that we were there. This one is not supported, but it's just right in front of my kitchen window, and I get to enjoy it while I'm washing dishes. So this one seems to be somewhat drought tolerant. I've been watching for that in the last couple of years with the drier summers that we've been having. And so I keep all of my other clematis fairly well watered. This one I really don't. And it's been performing just wonderfully. We have one that actually is behind the privacy fence, and it grows up behind it, and I never water it, and it does just fine. Now I'm finding out that it is from a drier area of the world. So it's actually China and Japan, and there must be some drier areas, but it is rather drought tolerant. Something really great to love. One thing that I'd like to say, okay, it does have a tendency to self-sow. Okay, so that might not appeal to all people. It doesn't bother me yet. It may at some point in time. So what I want to share with you, I gave a talk in Cedar Falls last year, and this gentleman emailed me, and he told me about a clematis that really is so much like sweet autumn, but it's sterile. So you won't have the self-sowing. It's called Paul Farges, Farges, summer snow. And Farge sort of rhymes with large. Anyway, he says, I've had this one for 15 years in my yard, and it seems indestructible. It can send out vines up to 20 feet in one season. It prefers full sun, but I do have it on a front arbor where it gets about 6 hours of full sun. The Japanese beetles will attack the petals of the flowers when in bloom, but they do no harm to the leaves or stems. Yes, isn't it? So here again, the good foliage. It's a sterile plant, so it will not shed seedlings or fruit. It was developed in the Ukraine. It's very hardy, zone 4 for sure, maybe even zone 3. It starts blooming in June and keeps on blooming through the end of August. So they're white. It sounds, and I've seen pictures of it before, not recently, but it sounds like it's very similar to this. So if you want the effect with a large foliage, the privacy screen, the wall of foliage that I like, that would be a really good alternative. He says the deer do not touch it. And he says, I trim it back in late winter by taking off about 1/3 of the branch growth, as blooms will appear on the new growth and not the older growth. So anyway, I wanted to pass that on. One more thing that I like about sweet autumn is it blooms in late summer, mid to late August, and then tends to hang around for a long time. And even when the flowers are sort of spent, it keeps a nice seed head that is decorative too. And so I don't know about your gardens, but that is a time in my garden where there's really not a lot of color. They get a little tired of our Iowa winters too. So that's another reason. Okay, enough about that. Liberation is a pruning group 2. And it is blooming, if you can see at the top of the slide, it's blooming along with the lilacs. So you know that it's blooming early in the season. But look at that bright color. It's an intense shimmery color. So you might want to be cognizant of what you're pairing it with, what other flowers are blooming in your garden at the same time, because it might be a little too much. But I like this plant. The President is a pruning group 2 cultivar. It has a slightly cupping, so I've heard that if you maybe plant it, I think I would plant it if I had a chain link fence. I think I would plant it on there so you could actually look down into the flowers. So the President, that's been around for a long, long time too. Nice, tried and true. Claire de Lune, I love this one. Very early blooming, does well with some shade. I really would keep this one out of full sun. Huge blooms. Look at the bloom. I mean, I'm talking 8 inches across on some of them. It's actually delightful. This one I have marked as Vino. It could be bourbon. I'm not sure. Because, and the reason why I say that, even though it came with a tag that said Vino, now that I'm looking at pictures, bourbon has a remarkably similar color to it. But under whatever name, the color is so vibrant, your eyes will want to drink this one in for a long time. These are unretouched photos. I don't even know how to work with Photoshop. These are the real deal. I couldn't, when this first bloomed, I couldn't take my eyes off from it. I did long enough to run in to get the camera so I could share them with you. Florida Sieboldii. I don't know if you'll see this around too much. It is offered at Donahue's in Minnesota, no less. Now, when I first planted this, I did not know that this is actually better suited to zone 6. So it did not last too long in my garden, but I have to tell you, I'm really glad that I didn't know that, because I have gotten so much joy out of this plant the one season that I had it. And even though I do want my clematis to hang around for several years, I want you to consider this. I paid about $10 for this plant, and I got so much fun out of this. Now the outer sepals, those white petals, will drop, and then that purple inner boss will linger for a while longer. So it makes a long, and then you can also see the long stems on this one. It makes a wonderful cut flower as well. Look at how beautiful it is. I love it. It is. It's very graceful, very refined looking, but it's a group of, small group called the Floridas, Florida Sieboldii. You could put this in a container if you have a place where you could overwinter it. That would be an idea. I would definitely buy it again. This one is called Pink Champagne. It's sometimes sold under, it's also known as Kakio, K-A-K-I-O. This one bloomed its little heart out one year, and then it didn't show up for, I bet, 2 or 3 years at least. I think it just got totally spent, but it had so many blooms on it. And so I don't assume that since it didn't show up this year that it's gone. I will let it, as long as it doesn't take up prime real estate that I have to have something there, I will let it see if it'll reappear. And sure enough, it did. In the last couple of years, it did reappear, and it has flowered again. So we call that the phoenix phenomenon, where it's sort of like the bird rising out of the ashes. Alabast, this one likes some shade, huge alabast colored flowers with a green tinge on it. It's really quite lovely. It's a pruning group too. Crystal Fountain, told you a little bit about this earlier. Have you seen this one? It is really a delightful flower. The outer sepals will fall first, and then you've got that spiky inner boss that will remain for a little while longer. This also is a really good cut flower. There's another shot. I love taking pictures. Sprinkles is a pruning group too. I found this on a Master Gardener's bus trip just around Boone, Ames area, Lincoln View Farms or something like that. Anyway, I had never heard of sprinkles before, so the lady went out and actually dug it out of the garden, and I planted it. And the reason why it's called sprinkles, and you can't see it so well on this slide, but there are little dots that show up on that inner bar, and that's what it's named after. Okay, yes, I did get up on a ladder and take its picture, because I was really enamored with how it just sort of marched up this clematis and just kind of kept on going. Cassis is, this is the only one that I'm currently growing in a container. I paid more for this one than I normally do. It was a Mother's Day present to myself, well, from my husband to myself. Mother's Day, I don't want a Mother's Day present other than flowers. I don't know about you, but that's my Mother's Day present. So cassis is a really gorgeous plant. Love it. Pruning group 3. This one you prune down. I actually brought it into the house. I didn't this last year. I put it in the shed. I'll see if it comes back. But a lot of interest, a lot of different things going on in this plant. This one is, when I bought it, it said, the plant said, thing said Ryman, R-E-I-M-A-N. It doesn't look like the picture on the thing, so I'm not 100% sure. But it's sort of, I don't know, it just, the way, again, it doesn't have a lot of horizontal support, so it just kind of congregated down. It just reminds me of Easter basket full of goodies, so I really like what it's doing. But here again, some of the big box stores, I guess, you know, get mislabeled, and I asked somebody that worked at Lowe's, and he said, you know, they go through so many hands that, you know, sometimes they just get. So I had bought several at the end of the season, and there were a few of them that were mismarked. So I just want to let you know about that. Okay, so here's the nod to pruning group 3. These are another exception. I do not want, when you start introducing these to your, and maybe you already have, they're the alpinas, macropetallas, montanas, which don't always last a long time in our climate either. Some will have more success than others. But these have fine, fibrous roots, and you don't want to bury them deep. So plant them as you would a typical plant. I bought this one, and I didn't really care to introduce this group because they bloom so early, and they don't have a real long bloom time. But when I saw this one, it's called Stolwet Gold. It is the only clematis that I am aware of that has chartreuse-colored leaves, and I had to have it. The bonus is these ballet skirt type flowers. And I don't know, they maybe lasted a few weeks in my garden, but I think it's so well worth it. I've introduced another one in this group. The alpinas come from the Alpine, so the mountains in like Europe. And I just love their little flowers. They are so gorgeous. They bloom really early, and they are said to be very tolerant of the cold. But I've also read, too, that it wouldn't hurt because they bloom so early to sort of shelter them on a wall or something. And they do really good along the privacy fence here. So clematis make absolutely wonderful cut flowers. This one I think is called Rhapsody. I have it in a wall vase with sweet peas. Florida Sieboldii. in a short vase with a hosta leaf and variegated Carl Forrester grass. You recognize that. Crystal fountain. Dawn is a compact. I'd give this one a little bit of shade. This one only grows 4 to 6 feet tall. Really beautiful little flower called Dawn. And Henry I. This one I've read has, is a little bit more prone to clematis wilt, but I think it's garden worthy anyway. Lots of blooms on this plant. Raguchi. Anybody familiar with Raguchi? This one is herbaceous, so it's non-clinging. When I first planted this plant, masses of foliage grew. I didn't know what to do with it really. It mildewed, because this one has a little bit more of a tendency to mildew. And I thought, I can't have this in my garden, so I cut it down, dug it up, thought it was all gone. Didn't see it for, I bet, 4 years at least. And a couple of years ago, I was over at a friend's, and she goes, Rita, have you ever seen Raguchi? It's such a darling little. And I said, yes, I used to have it in my garden. And the way she had it just, in her little obelisk, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to get this one again. I went home and I was watering my flowers out in the front. And this is one of the reasons why I actually do like to water flowers sometimes. It gets a little old after a while, but this was waiting for me. This truly is the Phoenix phenomenon. This is what was waiting for me that day. And so don't give up on them if they don't come. Who knows, you might have a surprise waiting for you. My fascination with clematis is actually increasing as I try varieties new to me. I hope this addiction never ends. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, write down your questions if you have them. Can you hear me? Yeah, let me talk into yours. Write down your questions if you have them and bring them up to the podium. We're going to take about a 15-minute break to eat. Enjoy the cookies and the coffee back here, and thanks to all the volunteers. Carol Throckmorton. Carol, come over and pick your prize. We don't need to do all of them at once. Do a few questions,
Should I
and
do?
then we'll draw a few more.
Okay, I'm going to hold on to this one.
What was the name, Carol?
Carol
Throckmorton.
Is there a Carol here? Carol Throckmorton? Oh, okay, well, let's do another one then, because you got to be here to win. Lonnie Parrott? Okay, next one.
Oh, okay.
Marty Mount? Okay, come on over.
Oh.
Now I'm going to have the questions, we'll read the questions and give a brief answer, because we've got a lot of questions. We'll try to get through them all. Go ahead.
Okay, first one, what type of soil for clematis and how often do you water? Really good question, thanks for asking it. Type of soil. Clematis prefer a nice humusy soil. They can grow in a more dense soil, but like I said, if you do plant them in that type of soil, don't plant them deep. But probably the most important thing, and this concerns the water too, is that they like to be watered, but water, deeply. They like drainage, sharp drainage. They don't want to be sitting in water. So, and don't water every day. Please don't water every day. Water to the point where they're just starting to dry out, and then provide it. And another thing that I want to say to you also is for the first couple of years, make sure that those roots are well hydrated while they establish. And it might take a year or two before they're established. Make sure that they are. I hope that answered that question, okay? Which clematis are happy in clay soil? Okay, so I don't know that any of them are really happy in clay soil. Some of them will tolerate clay soil. Look in, whoever wrote this question, look in the little book, yeah, the one on the far, or right in the middle there. Look in that one and look in the back. And she has them, I think she might have a group that might do a little better in clay soil. I don't have clay soil, so I don't really worry about that too much. But if you plant a clematis too deeply and then and it's that heavy soil, it's just going to suffocate those roots. And, which did you have climbing in the lilac tree? There was two of them. Blue Ravine was one of them, and that one was the one that was blooming along with Sweet Autumn Clematis and the Sedum. That's Blue Ravine. The one that was, the other one was the no-name one that was blooming I have two lilac trees on my patio, and this one is in a fairy garden. And I'm not sure what the name is. One thing that I do want to tell you is that I really recommend is that you label when you plant them. Those little tags that come in there, they break off and they blow away. I have an example over on the table of a plant marker that my husband made for me, and he sells them as well, and that's not why I'm telling you this, but thank you for holding that up. That one, yeah, well, you know these ones that you can buy? Okay, so they start out looking like that, and then pretty soon you'll have just a bare wire. And, well, let me show you. Let me just show you the one. Pretty soon you'll have a bare wire, and even if you did conscientiously mark that, am I supposed to be over here? I don't know if I'm on. Okay, so I really recommend that you label them as soon as you plant them. This one might fall over in the wintertime, but it won't blow away. And what I do is I take this. This is a Brother P Touch. It's got a cartridge in it. You type out the name. I think there's even slicker, high test ones, but this one, I wish I had an example on it. But anyway, it has a clear background, and it's white and with black lettering. And so I put that on the front. I take a paint marker, and I write the number of the pruning class on the back with the paint marker. So I don't have to keep referring to my list to see what it is. I just know immediately, 1, 2, or 3. That's what I do with those. Okay, so what is or looks like clematis wilt? Thank you for that question. Clematis wilt is when your plant is growing and it's going to open tomorrow, and then all of a sudden it looks like this. And it looks wilt. It looks like it needs water. First of all, before assuming that it's clematis wilt, and the wilt is a fungus that gets into the plant. Generally, if it's broken, that fungus can get in there by that way, generally from the ground. So before assuming that it is wilt, check the lower part of the stem and see if maybe it was inadvertently clipped off by, your friendly neighborhood rabbit or something like that, or something else, before assuming. But if it is wilt, if it's attached and it truly is wilt, you don't want it falling onto the ground and infecting that soil, because it will. So what I want you to do is and you can prune your clematis with a sharp scissors, or those wonderful pruners, and you don't have to snip them off at an angle or anything. You can just do them straight across. With wilt, I want you to cut that down to the ground, and this is the reason they affect pruning group 2 more often than any other. And so prune them down to the ground, and that's why you want to bury them deep and bury them at a 45-degree angle so you get more roots growing. And so when you do, if you ever do get wilt, then prune it down to the ground. It's not dead, so don't worry about that. But what I want you to do, I don't want you to put it on the compost pile. Put it in a bag and tie it up and throw it in your garbage, okay? And if there are any leaves on the ground, tidy those up and get rid of those too, okay? And then be sure to, I like to use, doesn't matter what the kind is, but I like to use these virus and bacteria killing wipes. I use these for convenience. Be sure, whenever you prune, be sure to clean off your pruners. Okay, any other questions about wilt?
It doesn't affect the whole plant.
It doesn't affect, generally it won't kill the plant if you get rid of it, and you know, it may show up again. If it happens too often, you might want to just dig up the plant and then not plant another clematis there for a while. Okay, will clematis grow up a deciduous tree? Yes, I had it in a couple of my lilac trees. It absolutely will, and in nature, that's what it does. They will grow over shrubs and up trees. I think your next speaker, Susan Applegate Hurst, I saw at her house before she moved. She had a sweet autumn clematis growing up into a deciduous tree, and it was pretty neat. So yes, you absolutely can. And if you're going to plant them next to a tree or a shrub, plant them away from, so that the roots aren't competing with one another, because they'll compete for, you know, whatever resources, whether it be water or fertilizer. So plant them maybe a foot or so away, and then lean them towards whatever support with a stake or something like that. Direct it. I've even seen ropes, you know, where the rope is tied to the tree and to the ground or whatever. I don't know how they do that, but you absolutely can. Okay, this one is I have a large, well-established sweet autumn clematis. Can I cut it back and transplant it? Ooh. Huh. You could try it if it's, this is my rule of thumb I have transplanted a couple of clematis. For some reason, I thought my silver moon was in the wrong place. And I dug it up. I thought I had gotten all the roots. And I planted it in another spot, and it didn't really establish, I don't think I watered it well enough, so it didn't really establish there that well. But it grew back in its original place. And so I thought, obviously you belong here. But I digress. So anyway, my rule of thumb is I really don't transplant it if I don't have to. I'll just buy another plant. They're not that expensive. But I will say I did several years ago, I did transplant a sweet autumn, and I planted it in a shade area, and it's growing. So yes, you can. Whether or not you'll have any success, I don't know. It says, how long would it take to get it reestablished? What I would do is I would cut it back severely. Any clematis that you're trying to transplant, cut it back severely, plant it, get it well established with water, fertilize it, and make sure it doesn't dry out completely. That's the bane of clematis are either it's dried out to the point of no return, or it's so wet that it just drowns it. So water really is critical, but you don't want too much or too little. Your trellises are so sturdy. Do you get them at specific place? No, I have bought several trellises. My husband, Keith, is actually creating garden art now. He started to weld a few years ago, and he's creating and selling garden art. So I have several of his prototypes in my garden. I also really like to repurpose. So as I'm going by, people's garbage, I'm looking for, maybe a gazebo or anything metal. Could I grow a trellis on that? So I do that, or a clematis on that. Can I use that as a trellis? I use anything and everything that I can. Very eclectic. So I get them all over wherever I can find them. Arbors are great. I have several arbors in my garden. I bought a few of them at a place at the downtown Des Moines Farmers Market and became a preferred customer. They delivered the next one to my house. So I have lots of them. Yes, let's do that. Okay. Fern Allison. Should I do another question? Sure. I planted a Henryi last June. It bloomed 5 or 6 flowers. Oh, it's pruning group 2. They want to know, whoever wrote this wants to know what pruning group it is. It's definitely a pruning group 2. So, and this is another point that I want to make. If you planted a clematis last year, no matter what pruning group it is, prune it down hard to about 12 inches this year. This year only. What'll happen is it'll get, there'll be more branches coming out and you'll get a sturdier plant. So no matter what pruning group it is, do that. If it's a pruning group 2, you could wait until after the first bloom and then cut it down and let it regenerate itself. And should I prune it to 12 inches this spring if you planted it last year? Yes. I just answered that. And in subsequent years, prune it lightly, either early spring or very lightly, or after it's done blooming. And after it's done blooming, you can either prune it down, maybe a third of the plant, third of the way down. It's sort of ask your plant what it wants you to do. Because if it's looking really raggy, and you really want to rejuvenate it, cut it down further. If it's looking good, and then another thing that you can do is prune some harder, and some lighter. And then you'll get, blooms on a greater part of your plant too. So you can do that and then just, alternate them or whatever. But just kind of let your plant tell you what it wants. Our clematis particular about soil pH. They like a little bit more alkaline than acid. And, you might find a reference that contradicts that, because I find a lot of contradictory, but I think I would say a little bit more alkaline, but not a great deal. More, 7 is neutral, maybe a little bit more alkaline than that. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Can you list some more clematis that will grow and bloom in full shade? Okay, so I mentioned Silver Moon, definitely get that one. Clair de Lune. I've had that one around for so long that its name actually used to be Blue Moon. I think the new name fits it a little better. Any of the striped ones, like you saw Asso, that'll grow in some shade. As far as full shade, what I would look at is look at some of the reference in some of the books. I think these two in particular will have a little charts in the back that will tell you. So this one, for example, towards the back. I don't know if I have time to. Here, shade clematis. Asso, like I said, Barbara Dibley, Bee's Jubilee, Carnaby, Charisma, Dawn, Gillian Blades, I mentioned her. Josephine, nice, really fun flower. Louise Rao, Nellie Moser, Pink Champagne, Proteus, Silver Moon, Waters Primrose. If you want, I'll leave that open there. If you want to come up and take notes, you can. Elsa Spaeth, How Much Sun? That's the one with the big blooms, the purple, grows well, 6 to 8 or 10 to 12 feet, depending on which reference you see. I think this one could take part and part. I don't know. A lot of them will take part sun, part shade. Also, too, I want to mention, too, that very often you'll see that clematis like their heads in the sun and feet in the shade. The reason for the shade is it has more to do with the amount of soil. And so if your soil is in hot sun, it's going to bake. And so I would mulch. I think mulch is the best thing. Some references will say plant some annuals around there. As long as you're not disturbing the roots of the clematis, I think that's fine. I like the ground covers that just stay there and they keep it shady. I've seen rocks or different metals and stuff like that. If it's in full sun, don't put a rock on it. It'll just bake it. It's more about the moisture than it is about the shade. So if it's in sun and it gets enough moisture, you're okay. But mulch, any good mulch. Take it a few inches away from the stalks, though, because you don't want it the stalks to rot. Can clematis be transplanted? If so, when? Don't try this in the middle of the summer. Early spring, late fall, as long as you allow enough time for the roots to establish before we get a hard frost. I think that would be my rule of thumb. Otherwise, I think you could pretty much do it. Here again, it depends on how well you take care of it after you do it. Yes. Should we do another door prize? Okay. Shirley, is it L? Leakin? Shirley Leakin?
You had a question about support.
Yes.
I bought a cattle panel from Marshlands.
Yeah.
Cut it in half lengthwise. I had two.
Oh, I love it. Is that the cattle panel? Is it, are the wires, is it kind of a wire thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're narrow?
Wire.
Yeah.
4x4. Yeah, 6x6.
Yeah, if it's the point that I was going to make is if it's a piece of wood or something that's wide like that they won't surround that very well, or it won't climb up that very well. But yes, just you're only limited by your imagination as far as what to grow them on. You don't have to go out and buy fancy trellises. Use some of the most charming displays, I think, are through shrubs and trees and even ground cover. You can use them as ground cover. What soil conditions are required? I think we already talked about that. Well draining is probably the most important thing. And if your soil needs to be amended, you can do that. Dig the hole. When you're planting clematis, I don't have room in my garden to do this, but if you can, 18 by 18. So 18 inches wide, 18 inches deep. Get enough of that soil worked up so that those roots can spread out, because your success is going to depend on how well those roots acclimate to your soil. It's pretty deep. It is pretty deep. Now, you wouldn't have to do that so much with the herbaceous, but for the others, I really would Okay, so is winter protection needed? If you were planting one of the Montanas, I would say definitely yes. That's pruning group 1. Definitely. I think it depends on your area. I personally do not. My garden is sort of survival of the fittest. And so, yeah, you know what? I don't really like to fuss too much with it. But if you feel like doing it and you can put some leaves over it or something to protect it, I'm all for that. And I think your clematis would thank you for that too. if potted, how do you winter them, or are they an annual? Well, they would be an annual if you didn't winter them very well, and it happens. What I did was I put it in an unheated garden shed. I don't know. I don't have a lot of space to do that. What you could do is maybe put it against a wall and then put a tarp around it and put insulating material around it. You could do that too. Do deer tend to bother clematis? I've heard mixed reviews. Some say yes and some say no. That Chris was so kind to notify me of, Paul Farge. Evidently the deer doesn't bother that. Some of them do. All parts of clematis are toxic, but it doesn't mean that animals won't try it. I've had rabbits that'll they don't eat it, they just cut them off. So, I don't know, there's mixed, I don't have a deer problem, so I don't have any experience with that. Yeah, are there disease problems with clematis? Like insect problems? You mentioned the clematis wilt, so yeah, that would be one of the problems that would be inherent with clematis. As far as insect problems, there really are not a lot, but you could watch for slugs and watch for earwigs. Earwigs will tend to, if it's what's doing it, tend to take a bite, looks like a circular bite out of it. And you can maybe roll up a newspaper or something, and they'll hide in there, and then go out in the morning and just kind of, tap them out into a hot sudsy water and get rid of them like that. Slugs, you kind of want to pay attention because they'll gobble up the plant too. But other than that,
Do you ever trouble with Japanese beetles?
Japanese beetle got my Texensis Duchess of Albany this last year or the year before, but I don't really have a lot, knock on wood, I don't really have a lot of Japanese beetles so far. And Chris was telling, was it Chris? The species? The species, yeah, the species. He's talking about the species Texensis. That's the granddaddy of all the red ones. And it has little tiny urn-shaped flowers on it. And you can detect a little, I think it's yellow inside, but it's very tight. Small flowers, you'll want to put that close to the front of your border. You don't want to put it in the back, it'll get lost. Same with pitcheri, different species like those. Plant them, closer. But Chris. Oh yes, that was the other. The Texensis species is a good hummingbird draw. I have a spring flowering clematis that looks like sweet autumn. Do you know this? If so, when to prune? When? When does it bloom?
Spring.
May? Is it a climber?
It is.
Huh. Stump the speaker. What do you think?
I had one that bloomed in the summer that shocked me. And Wayside at one point in their catalog did have a summer blooming sweet autumn clematis.
And this is spring. Now, Chris, your Paul Farge starts in June, did you say? June through almost September, he says. I don't know. I know some of the herbaceous, like recta, maybe even hexapetala, they will bloom earlier in the year and then continue blooming. They're herbaceous. I don't know what it is. Armandii maybe, but I don't think that grows in our climate so well. I don't know. Have me over, I'll take a look at it and see what we can come up with. Can you take cuttings from most cultivars? You can, yes you can. They showed me at Donahue's how to do it, but I don't know, I'm not a such a great horticulturist. You can do it. I would consult. There are guides that you can do that. You have to cut them in a certain place, and then I would consult the experts on that because I'm not an expert on this. I just buy a new plant. Is it true that clematis like their heads in the sun and feet in the shade? We already answered that. Do you take clematis out of hanging baskets and store over winter? I don't. I know that they're not going to overwinter in a hanging basket. They just aren't going to. I don't care where you put them. You could bring them in the house, I suppose, and cut them back and fertilize them and take them back out. I don't want to fuss with them. I don't really have that much room in my house either. I really don't know how to answer this question. I'm sorry. Can you keep a container or any clematis in a pot in a garage at 50 degrees? You know, some of them do actually want to go dormant. So I'm not sure 50 degrees. You know, and then you'd have to keep them watered as well. And then I would be concerned about maybe mildewing or something. So I'm not sure. You could try it. If you try it, let me know how it works for you, because I don't know what to tell you on that one. Tell us more about Donahue's clematis in Minnesota. Yes, I will gladly tell you about it. After those first two and I couldn't find them, now I'm finding them more locally. But Donahue's has a retail store. They're in Faribault, Minnesota. You have to go off from Highway 35, Interstate 35 to reach them, and you can Google the directions. I'm like a kid in a candy store when I go there. They have lots of clematis that you can buy. You can also they'll mail them to you if you want. My family's from Minnesota, so we go up there regularly anyway, so I like to go and buy them. I've had, you know, gosh, I almost have to leave my luggage home. I bring so many of them home sometimes. But they call themselves the clematis specialists. They know what they're doing. They also have, in their retail store, they sell more than clematis. They sell annuals, roses, all kinds of things, and they usually have their grand opening in April. For the year. They close down about the end of June, and then they reopen and they have a Christmas thing. And yeah. They have this, all of their offerings you can get online.
How do you spell Donahue?
It's DONAHUES. DonahuesClematis.com. Oh, I think I might have put it on that. It's on the Project Green website. I think it's on there. What is the title of the book you talked about? Also the author. Oh, okay. So Edith Malik is, she no longer is doing the American Clematis Society. Edith Malik. Malek. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to direct you to her website. Yeah, you can get this on Amazon. But I bought it, at the time that I bought it, you could only buy it by joining the American Clematis Society, and so I did. And, you know, it doesn't have, you know, all of them in there, but it's got a nice selection to start with. She has a website now. She's no longer doing the American Clematis Society, but she now has a website called clematisqueen.com, and that's on that handout too that should be on Project Green website. Yeah, clematisqueen.com. Another really good website is clematis.hull, Hull, and that's on the website also, .ac.uk. Great source. So, whoops, the other two that I have up here, I really like also. This one is by an author by the name of Linda Butler. She's actually the curator of the Rogerson Clematis collection, about 20 miles south of Portland, Oregon. And I'm going out to meet her this spring. And I'm going to their Inviting Vines plant tour, garden tour. And on Fridays, they have volunteers come out and help them at the Clematis collection. So I'm going out there to volunteer. But one of the things that I like about her book is that whereas these are really good reference books, hers is more of a anecdotal type story. And so she's got just tons of information. But she also tells you, too, how to pronounce some of the names. She also has, at the end of the chapter, she has clematis that she suggests on the topic that she just discussed. I think she has lists at the back of them also. Really good one. I really, really love this one for the technical information, but also the pictures are stunning in this book.
Who wrote that one?
Charles Cheshire, Chesshire. All three of them are on this list. Go to the website, Project Green website, and take a look at that. But I really like these. All the ones that are marked I have. What else did I want to say about this? Yeah, they really. Oh, and I got these. I actually got these on half.com, so they were used books. I got them very reasonably. One other thing that I want to tell you. Oh, we're right at 4 o'clock. Can I just tell you one more thing? I like to use this Velcro. And don't use those metal twist ties because those little they're too fragile and they'll break off. And you can tie them up with a twine or something like that. But this is actually reusable. And it's a Velcro. So you just cut it to whatever size you want it, and then you just overlap it on each other. And so you can move it up the trellis. You can, use it on another one. Really good stuff. You can get this. I got this locally at Piney Ridge Greenhouse in Johnston. But you can get this probably at Menards. You can get these at a lot of places. Okay.
Hey, let me do 2 more door prizes. We got 2 hats here. Joanne Donnell? She's still here? She left. Okay. John Hieronymus?
I think he left.
Oh, come on. Muriel Jarvis? Okay. And one more. Fran Potras? Okay, good.
So
Well,
you've got all of those?
we got them all taken, yeah.
Okay, I want to draw one more name, but you'll have to come up and see me at the Greater Des Moines Botanical Garden to claim your prize, okay? We are going to have some really fabulous clematis for sale. You will want to arrive early for the best selection, and really what I've told people in the past is if you wait until Saturday afternoon, you won't find any clematis for sale. So what I'm going to do is, if you know that you want to come up there, you can tell me from the list. I brought a list today of the clematis that we'll be offering, and if you let me know ahead of time, I will buy a clematis for you, and you come up and get it, okay? And so that is going to go to, if you want it. If not, that's good. That's also good. Peggy Jedlicka. Are you coming up to Des Moines? All right, cool. Cool.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's been lots of fun. I hope to see you in a month.